And when people ask me, what do I think is going to happen? I don't know when, and I'm not trying to predict the future or anything. But I can sure tell you that what scares me the most is new diseases.
Sharks.
Yeah.
Have you seen the kind of the older movies? Like
Outbreak?
like the what?
Outbreak?
Is that the one with Morgan Freeman?
It's like
Isn't he in every movie?
Yeah, I guess so.
it was like about
I mean, he's God, so he's in everything.
United States and being airborne and quarantine a town, no one will blow it up.
Oh! I know what movie's true. I forget what it's called.
You know, I'm not sure. There's a lot of movies like that, but back to me.
127 days
Too many students talking. I'm getting grumpy.
Get the stink eye.
This is the stink eye. I think the movie tonight's really good. If we get to these study goals today, tonight would be awesome. If the timing doesn't work out, you might want to watch it tomorrow. Because unlike a lot of Hollywood films about diseases, this one had a bunch of collaboration from the Centers for Disease Control. There were actually professional epidemiologists working on the script and production of this film. And so when the movie came out, the scientific community was like very pleasantly surprised that the movie was so scientifically accurate. There was like an interview on NPR when it came out about like this dude from the CDC saying this is the first time we feel we've been able to reach the public with real science. Like all the reviews were like, wow, really scientifically rigorous. Coincidentally, after you watch the film, I will point out one thing that everybody realizes was kind of fudged. But because I talk about disease, hopefully today, this movie is a perfect fit. And, you know, it's like Hollywood people, so it's not like some cheesy documentary. It's like a nice film with Gwyneth Paltrow and stuff. And like, I want to see it. Tonight at 6 and tomorrow night at 6. Is there a question somewhere? Like every movie ever, it's about an hour and a half. All right.
How long is it?
I'll stab you in the neck with this pen.
So then you can't say it again. Cody, most movies are like 8 inches. Depending on the DVD or...
So...
If it's Blu-ray, it's probably like 5.
I may be able to give for one student community service hours if they take really good notes.
On the movie?
The rest of the semester and possibly the rest of the school year. Here's the deal. I need to hire a peer note taker. The way it would work is at the end of the day, you would take like cell phone photographs of your notes and either email them to me or something like that.
Like the 4.6.5.
Well, all that you need to provide are your in-class notes, but if you take them on the homework, I guess that would be okay. You would need to sign a paper about how you're not going to distribute these anywhere else because that would be considered cheating. And the other person who's going to get them would have to sign a paper about how they're not going to distribute these without cheating. But I would basically be paying you community service hours. I'm confused about this. We might end up not even doing it. I'm not promising you anything. And a lot of kids take notes. I need somebody who takes like exceptional notes. I don't want you to fake it starting now. I want to see notes you've taken so far. So if you're interested, take a photograph of your notes from Monday and Tuesday this week and email them to me today. I'll show them to the other student. They might not like your handwriting. They might not think yours are the best, but whatever. I have a student or two that can't take notes while they're listening. It's like an audio-visual processing something or other. And so we want to see if it helps to have a student note taker, a peer note taker. My understanding of brain science is that it doesn't help. Seeing somebody else's notes doesn't help your brain because they're someone else's memories, not yours. But if the student can't take any notes anyway, it might be better than nothing. So we'll see. I'm open to this. I'm happy, whatever. If you have a problem, I'm here to help you with that. So whatever, we'll work on it. But what I can offer you, if your notes are good and it works out and I end up selecting you as a community service, like 1 hour every day that you're in class, you're basically getting community service because you're writing notes for another person. If you're interested, you have to send to my email, not my text message, photographs of your notes from Monday and Tuesday of this week. Are there any questions?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Your notes. All right. Take out assignment 6.1. We're going to finish the study goals from the reading packet. And then we're going to get to the really nitty-gritty. The nitty-gritty. The nitty-gritty. What is the nitty-gritty?
Gritty up the nitty.
The nitty?
Which one was that?
I think we're looking for number 26, 27.
Which one are we on?
26 or 27, I think. All right. I will now start asking questions since you have all the stuff out. Did we discuss number 26 about our selection, case selection? Did we discuss number 27 about youth bulges and instability?
Like how youth bulges create instability?
What?
Like how youth bulges create instability?
Yeah. We talked about that? So you remember that the time when the United States had the most political upheaval in the last century was after when the baby boomers got to college? Okay, great. Then we are on number 28, I suppose. Could somebody please read the question for me? I want to see if you got the typo version or the right version. Perfect. What is the best way to control climate change? So a couple of those were toward the end, but the bottom line is limiting population growth. Dollar for dollar, the cheapest way to cut carbon is to address population growth. It's interesting, but a lot of people talk about like, my electric car, and I got hydrogen factories, and solar power, and high-speed rail, and all that stuff takes carbon from here to there. Meanwhile, we're stacking on more humans. For the amount of carbon produced per human on Earth today, it's so cheap to lower that carbon because family planning services per human are relatively very, very small. And each of those humans that would otherwise produce a lot of pollution, it's very, very expensive. It's very, very cheap, to lower their carbon contribution. Apparently, per amount of carbon, it is the cheapest climate solution. Number 29, I think you've already seen the shapes of how places look in relation to their AIDS survivorship and also their AIDS case numbers? Yes? 29? Age? Yeah. Number 30, I'd like someone to answer for me the study goal. I mean, the warm-up, please. What is the precautionary principle? Welch.
The idea that if something may be harmful, even if we haven't proved that it is, we'll take precautionary steps to limit that.
Yeah. Anybody know? He says, if it may be harmful, we take precautionary steps just in case. Does anybody know a common figure of speech that sort of reflects this strategy?
Better safe than sorry.
Right, better to be safe than sorry. In the United States, economically, we'd rather be sorry than safe. In many parts of the world, including Europe, they'd better be safe than sorry. In Europe, they have this registry of chemicals, where chemicals have to be tested and then listed. And if there's anything safer, they got to use that one instead. You know, still want to play it safe. In the United States, we're like, no, look, I made a coffee mug with pictures on it. And in Europe, they're like, yeah, but you know, there's chemicals you could paint your coffee mug with that are safer, so we'd rather you use the safer chemicals. And we're like, no, you're killing my economy. I'd rather be sorry than safe. Apparently, because the United States has like the world's largest chemical economy, it's given us a lot of really cool, exciting new consumer products. It's kept our economy spinning and people shopping and money moving. That's apparently been really good for us. On the other hand, a lot of other countries want to play it safer with their chemicals, and so we're not really able to play. And Europe and the United States have been butting heads really hard about chemical safety. I didn't want to get a tattoo that says I'd rather be sorry than safe. That's like a good motto to live by, you know, like over your chest, Gothic script. I'd rather be sorry than safe. Nerds, big old people. Okay. That sounds good, right?
Terrible.
You know you like it. You know you like it. Okay.
You go on a motorcycle.
You go on a motorcycle, like throwing the helmet off? Yeah! Oh man, this is getting really good. Okay. 31 gets 2 stars. I'm not going to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. 30 was reach and better be sorry than safe. Oh, it affects other countries' economies because, like ours, we have an economy that's really dependent on new consumer products, and we can't sell those internationally because they won't take them. It limits the reach of our economy. It limits the scope of our economy. Our economic potential is limited because they'd rather be safe and we'd rather be safe. Number 31. There's a list of toxins in your home. Look, if I gave you notes, you would pretty much end up copying that. And that would be like a whole day. So there it is. I already gave it to you. The College Board asks about these. They're pretty common. You've probably heard about a few of them. So I just want you to know this is like a 2-star goal because rather than spend a whole day talking about them, I found a single paper that had my notes. I was trying to figure out like how to condense my notes, and then I found this. So you can have it. 31, 2 stars. Number 32. Here's a fun fact for you. There's these things called PCBs. It's like a very toxic something or other. PCB stands for polychlorinated bisphenols or biphenyls. You need to know that it's one of the things in number 31, PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. But here's a fun fact. You find some in people, right? We live in a society that has a lot of these chemicals around. You sleep on a pillow with fire retardant, so you get some of this, sure. But the highest levels of polychlorinated biphenols found in any human on Earth, anybody know, do you all hear this punchline somewhere? It was in the story of stuff. The highest concentration of any organism on the planet is not the fish. It's something that eats the fish and something that eats them.
Humans.
Humans. Which humans?
Asian humans?
What?
I see where you're going. But there are people who end up with even more.
Okay.
Inuits?
Inuits, yeah. And apparently, we used to call them Eskimos, but it's my understanding that that's a very insensitive term. So even though that's the way that our culture universally understands, you know what I mean, right? People that live in the Arctic Circle and eat seal blubber and stuff.
Isn't that like Eskimos like one specific group or something?
And I believe that, like, A, there are a subgroup of Inuit, and B, even among that subgroup, it's a derogatory term. It's like saying the lower socioeconomic class within the Inuit. They are people who eat low-quality food or something like that. So whatever, don't quote me on the details. I don't claim to be an expert, but I know that the nice word is Inuit, not Eskimo, even though we all know them as Eskimo. Anyway, Inuit women have the highest concentration found in nature, especially in their breast milk.
So what does that do to their babies?
Because check it out, well,
Screws them up.
they get the highest doses of any humans on the planet. They live in one of the cleanest parts of the world, right? Everybody understands that's like pretty environmentally pristine. It's not like they're living in Detroit. They're living like Arctic Circle. You know, like snow and snow and snow and snow.
A little more snow.
A few steps here. First of all, PCBs are stored in fat. So big fish eats the little fish, and they live in cold water, so they bulk up on the fat. The killer whale eats the big fish, and they take all that fat, and they store the PCBs in the killer whale fat. Everybody know this? The Inuit eat large sea mammals. Like, I don't know, seal, walrus, killer whale, I don't know.
I don't think killer whale, but quail.
Fine. And so because the Inuit eat the fat of animals which store fat from the fat they eat, from the fat they store, from the fat all the way down the food web, the Inuit get the highest levels of PCB anywhere on the planet. But there's this other question, like, wouldn't like people with a lot of fat in Detroit have the most PCBs? It's an industrial chemical. It's from wherever you've got factories. If you live right next to the factory, aren't you getting it all? And the answer is no. Check this out. At 60 degrees north. At 60 degrees north. And may I please point at the map? What do we have at 60 degrees north? You know, all the people. No, look. A lot of people at 60 degrees. A lot of people at 60 degrees. A ton of people at 60 degrees. Like all the people at 60 degrees. A ton of people at 60 degrees. We've got like all the old businesses, all the factories. The economy of the previous century is centered at 60 degrees. Watch this. The productive economy of the world, all the factories and industry and stuff, at 60 degrees. And from 60 degrees to the North Pole, there is a high altitude circulation current in the air. You got to know this. It's called the grasshopper effect. This air pollution doesn't stay in Japan and the Middle East and Europe and Detroit. All that air pollution is carried by high altitude winds from 60 to the Arctic Circle. So even though those Inuit live in one of the most pristine environments on Earth, we ship all of our air pollution to them. Good luck, Inuits. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Enjoy the PCBs.
So the grasshopper effect is the high altitude winds that bring the chemicals.
The grasshopper effect is pollution carried by high altitude wind to the poles.
It
Yeah.
moves up the food chain.
Then separately, you've got the food chain issue. That's not grasshopper. Grasshopper is just air pollution traveling far. Air pollution traveling far.
Why is it called the grasshopper effect? What does it have to do with grasshoppers?
Because it jumps.
Ah, okay.
What's the bunny effect?
It's not like the slug where it like cruises along the ground.
That jump.
The bunny effect just sounds stupid.
Oh, a grasshopper.
The kangaroo
That's
effect.
something
It's
else.
pretty known for jumps.
Oh crap.
Is it?
Something bad.
The bunny effect?
No, but think about it. Grasshopper jumps like the highest thing compared to its body size. Like imagine a
All right, that was fun.
something as high as a grasshopper does. You can sound like deadly.
So much fun.
The killer grasshopper.
Gotta be quiet. Number 33, we will discuss with number 57. Write it down now. It's got like 3 stars, but we'll get to that later. Number 34, how many of you have heard about BPAs and BPA-free plastics and the baby bottles and the cans, and your water bottle probably says BPA-free on it somewhere? And everybody started drinking out of glass and out of metal because they were all worried about BPA.
Well, other than
What would be the precautionary response to BPA? Hey, it looks like that might be sketchy. Let's back off. There's an interesting article that was an NPR news story about that topic. I have a question for you. If I used quick read codes on your phone, you know what quick read QR codes are?
Yeah.
Those squares that have like little checkers. And it's like a barcode for your phone that it's a web link.
you said QR, I think we all know what you know.
QR?
Yeah.
Okay. If I used a QR code in your reader, realistically, be honest, how many kids do you think, instead of reading the article, would click and listen to a story on NPR?
No.
I would
But
definitely.
if I had
How long is the story on NPR?
It was so sick.
If it's like an hour interview, then no.
So
But
show me your hand.
Maybe make 2 packets.
I would. That sounds cool.
Maybe if you printed it and then listened to it.
Just because when you hear it once, it's not very.
We should at least do it so the people that
I'd
want
like
to do it have the
end up
option.
like going back and like.
It's kind of a gigantic hassle because I have to go to a QR generator and then print it and then change it every year because the reading packet, like the QR codes, they don't last forever.
Save a lot of paper.
And I still have to print it because not everybody has the technology. And so I'm just wondering if I should bother. Okay.
There's like certain words that we can spell or like certain names of things that we can write down.
Right, right,
Here and write down.
right. I mean, I just feel like a lot of kids don't read it anyway. They just skim it, and skimming it is still faster than listening to it. So I don't know. Okay, whatever. So there's a good article, number 34, it was on NPR. Number 35, I love this. Did you all see that thing about the risks of death to Americans? Like what's more likely to kill you? Ways to go. So check this out. 1 out of 1 is a big old circle which says you will die.
What?
Yeah, so that part is not the risk. Then, what are your odds within there of certain factors? And it's kind of tough to see it in the original article. It was colored like yellow, but there was a big circle like this
Heart disease.
for heart disease, America's #1 killer. And remember that a very small amount of heart disease is congenital or genetic, but a very huge majority of heart disease is directly tied to lifestyle decisions. Like how much coffee or how much sugar or how much fat or how much exercise or which types of fat or how much fast food or how many cigarettes or whatever. Very few laws governing that. When some ambitious mayor like Bloomberg in New York Or some ambitious state like California tries to regulate the amount of like sugar in soda or the amount of serving size for carbonated beverages. Everybody freaks out. How dare you? Then, cancer, 1 in 7. Again, a slightly bigger congenital genetic subset, but a large percentage of people who make decisions that raise their chances of cancer. Very, very, very little, if any, regulation of those things. You know, we'd rather be sorry than safe about chemicals that are carcinogenic, for example.
Rather be rich than safe.
Yeah.
That was the most panic I've ever seen for a paper cut in my life. I literally paper cut my eyeball once.
Oh,
How do you even do that?
how?
Let me see.
No, you're gonna make fun of me.
How do you paper cut your eyeball?
Wait.
Somebody threw cardboard.
Oh my god.
And you caught it with your eye. Why would you do
I
that?
didn't catch it with my eye. Knocked my glasses off and cut my eyeball. Yeah.
Tried to catch it.
Twice on the same eye.
Can you see?
I can see.
Yeah, mine feels fine.
I've been secretly blind.
How is it so? Why is it all become so common
No,
for people to have
but I'm
eyes?
special. That's what I will do next. Yeah. Yeah, whatever.
I got both of my eyes cut at once.
Yeah, exactly. I'll do it right now. Okay. That was no fun. Back to me. Back to me. You volunteered for that? You're a sucker.
I think that turns good.
In your eye?
To get my head in for headache.
Okay, watch.
Yeah, stab your brain out.
Of these, you'll notice we have very little regulation for the big stuff. You got to go all the way down here to firearm assault. To find, of course, we regulate firearms. I don't dispute that we should, but like, I wonder if we couldn't handle some of the easier targets first. There's so many different firearm laws. We got almost no interest in what you do about heart disease. And that costs us productivity in our economy. That costs us the grief of losing our family members. That costs us the tax dollars required to provide medical care for those people. We go all the way down there, like motorcycle accidents. Yeah, we got laws about that. Pedestrian accidents. Yeah, we got laws about that. Bicycle accidents. You got to wear a helmet if you're under 18. People got to be a certain distance when you pass them on the road. We've got laws that regulate all the way down to there. Fireworks discharge. We've got laws for fireworks. But nobody gives a crap about the big stuff. I always think about this poster. When I go to these family reunions with my wife's family, and there's always this one uncle that, like, every year, hey, how's Yosemite going? And I'll be like, oh, you know, rock climbing, whatever. And they'll go, like, oh, don't you feel like an irresponsible father? Knowing that you've got these 2 young children and you go rock climbing? I was like, you know, I just saw you had like 47 whiskeys. And you just smoked like the 38th pack of cigarettes today. And you haven't walked further than the toilet as long as I've known you. Like 15 years later. I'm like handling the big stuff. I know that climbing is risky, but like, I just kind of wish we were a little more logical about these things.
Out of like curiosity, what could you do? Like, what kind of law could you pass to try and limit like heart disease?
We could stop subsidizing corn to make sugar less cheap. How about this? America's poor can buy a soda for less than a head of broccoli.
Tax cut.
Oh yeah, that's like a thing that I read.
Because we pay farmers to grow corn to make sugar cheap. There's that. I mean, think about what it costs to get like a cheeseburger, because that's all corn, 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 corn. Everything's with corn.
99 cents.
Yeah.
Like, aren't things smaller because we have laws against them?
Which thing?
Like motorcycle accidents, like fireworks, everything.
Oh, well,
Like,
if you have such
then
faith-
it'd be bigger. Like,
If you had, I'm not saying that we shouldn't control things which are dangerous. I'm saying that we've got a huge target that nobody talks about.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, when they say falling, it's like number 6. Just falling.
Yeah.
Old people.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Well, that's like the most.
That, you can clump or you can split, right? So that's probably got all sorts of different falling. That might include rock climbers falling. And that probably includes, like people falling down the stairs.
Like one of the most dangerous jobs is like a roofer.
Okay.
A roofer.
Me. Everybody turn around. Look. I get to use the poster once a year. If you stitch together a gazillion photographs of the Earth, for the parts that don't have any cloud cover, at night, you get the Earth at Night poster. It was when they got the technology to do this one. So this, which is the Earth at day without cloud cover, and that, Earth at night without cloud cover, were done at about the same time. You can see the size of the cities, right? Like, I wonder where they have the most electricity. Probably right there. And like right up there, that looks like a lot of electricity. Yeah, Canada, they're a big CO2 emitter, I'll bet. Not there so much. Not there so much. And so there's a few other colors. I don't want to talk about them, but there's red, yellow, and blue. I recommend you check it out. It's just a neat poster. It's got, like, if you read that little key,
Really?
if you read the tiniest key in the world,
It's like 20 feet up the wall.
no, seriously, if you hop up on the desk and read the key, then, okay.
Let me just pull out my binoculars.
It's called light pollution. It's called light pollution. It's when outdoor lighting goes into the outdoors. And it just so happens that this is like a really severe pollution problem. Because a lot of birds navigate in the darkness, mapping with lights. And sea turtles find the ocean by looking for the twinkling moonlight reflected in the water. But the poor little sea turtles, they hatch out of the sand, and they see the twinkly lights brighter by crossing the freeway and aiming for Miami or Cancun or whatever. And so they all get run over by cars and eaten by dogs and stuff. You know, all of our life evolved on a planet with no lights at night. Except for like stars and the moon. And so like a lot of ducks, when they're migrating really high, they'll see a bunch of lights and they think it's the moon reflected on a lake. And they're like, oh, cool. And they'll like come into a big city and be like, what the F? And they waste all this energy like flying around LA trying to figure out where to find their migration routes. And so light pollution is like a growing concern. We'll talk more about it later in the year, so I'm going to move on. 37, interesting population statistics about California. 38, know the number where we suspect human population will top out. 9 billion, that's right. And number 39, poor Japan with their shrinking population size. They just can't figure out how to make more babies. So it sounds like they might start paying people to breed.
No way. They don't allow immigrants, right?
Because they're really adverse to immigration. It's not that they don't allow it, but it's really tough. My brother went to Japan and was like, this is awesome! And then he got like a work academic visa to go like help run a radio station at a college and like teach about language or something. And he's like, this is great! He's like, everybody was all welcoming and like people would like hook him up with food and a place to stay. And he's like, they're like the night. My brother's been all over the world. He traveled all over. And people like really took care of him. He was in love with the Japanese. He's like, until I told them I wanted to come live in their country, crickets. Everyone's like, oh no. And like, it's just like it's almost impossible to get a citizenship. Like, yeah. Okay. Enough about Japan. Reading packet, anyone? Questions? 6.2. friend Adam Dybert was in a band called the Aquabats, and he would get up on stage and he would take requests and then just hit it, and he can hit like the full 8-note. Yeah, he's like an amazing musician.
I can do it on the weight.
I've got video of him playing the Jimi Hendrix Springsteen Banner from Woodstock with like the sustained high C.
My dad was from Woodstock.
We did 6.2.
We did part of 6.2. We should be done with 45, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yes? Please look up. Please look up.
Yeah, I feel like you need
Please look up. I'm waiting. Everybody got these?
Yeah.
Cool. So we got to very quickly do 46 and 47 because what I really want to talk about today is 48.
Skip it.
I am like obsessed with disease in the future. Yeah.
So, well, going back to 45, in the book they had the 5 stages with stage 4 being like a second like population growth, but in this one here, stage 4 being when it balances out, and like stage 2 is, or stage 2 and 3 are what stage 2 is in this. So
Remember that division when I say some people call it 1, 2, 3 and some people call it 1, 2, 3, 4? Because early development and late development are demographically very different, but economically just part of making an economy modern.
so for the test we should reference that, probably, right?
I would, and heads up that on the college board there's not necessarily a singular, it's non-standardized. You know, it's like some people have a double XL in their clothing line and some just have an XL in their clothing line. It's the same thing. They just break it up differently. Just so you know, there is a lot of conversation about what happens next, and there are just many things that happen. Population growth or shrinkage, further development, or slipping backward. So everybody talks about other things that happen. They're just not a globally understood term like 1, 2, 3, and 4 are. Okay. Number 46. You might remember at the beginning of the year, we talked about carrying capacity for humans being sort of a tough question, right? Anybody remember why? Because it depends on
Technology. Depends on quality of life.
Depends on quality of life, right? We can pack a bunch of humans in like a bunch of sardines, and that would be a very high carrying capacity. Do you agree with me? If we don't care about their life, if we're willing to burn down the planet to supply a single batch of humans at one given time, we could probably have more than 20 billion humans, just like sardines, and use up everything, and then we all die. That's possible, right? Standing room only. That's a term. Number 46. It's called standing room only. And at the opposite extreme, there's the idea that we could have a small number of humans and literally leave no trace, have no impact on ecosystems whatsoever. That number is probably around 3 or 4 humans. And we would have no impact. We would just squeeze in with a few other herbivores and spread out the goods and we'd all be fine. That's the quote-unquote deep ecology. Neither very realistic, the terms for those two extremes. Number 47. How many of you have heard of Malthus before? How many of you have heard of the term social Darwinism before? Okay. I fear that sometimes Malthus gets the blame for stuff he did not say. So I'd like to add a little bit of background about Malthus just to make sure that I prevent confusion. Like when you get to college, watch. Someone will tell you the wrong details. Thomas Malthus was like a public worker. What do you call them? Social worker. Yeah, thank you. He's like a social worker. He wasn't like a formal social worker like we have today. He worked for a church that had the equivalent of a soup kitchen in London. It wasn't really a soup kitchen. He wasn't really a social worker. Things were different. It's like the early industrial age, middle industrial age, late industrial age. But anyway, he worked for this church and they would feed the poor. And the church asked him to write a report about how they should plan better Like, what are the challenges for the, can you give us some analytics, help us understand how to do a better job? And he said, as human populations continue to grow, he said the people having the most babies are the poor in London. And you understand why poverty leads to population growth, right? He talked about this. So he said, because the poor are having the most kids in London, we fear that as their population grows, they will face 3 limiting factors. Anybody know what they were? It's a famous quote. Famine, pestilence, and warfare. They are the 3 density-dependent limiting factors. More people, more shortage of food, more disease, and more fighting. So his groundbreaking, earth-shattering conclusion was, maybe we should offer, family planning support, talk to people about how many kids to have. And because he worked for a church, he wasn't saying, condoms and stuff. He was saying, maybe we should just talk to people about how many kids they have. And that was, the whole Malthus thing. That's the end. You can call that good. That's all he did. The problem is, I feel like I have to say more about this because a lot of people think he was suggesting you should let the poor die off if they overpopulate, or that people who make bad decisions should be allowed to die, and all this crap has been thrown on him by mistake. But I don't want to talk about Malthus anymore. Does anybody have any questions about Malthus? Because I really want to talk about number 48. I'm obsessed with this. Yeah. All right, number 48. I have a list of 9 reasons. I have a list of 9 reasons why population trends scare me in the future of disease. Does anybody know what the study of public disease is called?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, epidemiology.
Yeah.
Studying diseases in the public. And I think this is super fascinating. Everybody, because I teach about the end of the world basically, I teach about all these downhill trends and bummers. My career has been giving beautiful young people nightmares. I think about this all the time.
So much happy.
I'm so obsessed with how we're going to go down. And of all the possible things it could be, I'm very, 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 very scared of disease. Number 1. As our cities get bigger, and as we eat more wild foods, the risk of zoogenic diseases goes up. Does anybody remember what zoogenic disease was?
Disease started in animals and transmitted by animals.
Yeah, a disease that got started in animals. All over the world, our cities are spreading into wilderness. And all over the world, when people don't find stuff at the supermarket, they're just going into the bushes to find something to eat. So with growing populations, we predict a rise in zoogenic disease. Number 2. Because we're all living in cities, and most of those cities aren't modern global metropolis, we're getting a lot closer to sewage and trash and livestock. Stuff that makes us sick. It's important to point out that humans are urbanizing and most cities are not modern cities. Number 3. There's a 3-piece ratio. So watch this. More humans equals More places for disease to live equals more disease. In other words, more humans means more hosts for disease organisms. You know, like if your city builds more houses, more people can move in. Well, if your humans are building more humans, that means more disease can move in. That's an interesting mathematical issue. We just offer more terrain for diseases. There's more of us. Number 4. We've got these spectacular antibiotics and medications that kill 99.999% of disease organisms. Such good news, but why is that also bad news?
Because they kill the good stuff in your body too.
Yes, there is the thing about the unintended consequences, but also
That 0.1% is going to be really, really resistant to all the products that we use.
that's right. That's right.
I found a cactus laying around when you need a cactus.
Where did you find this laying around?
Christian brought it to me for video production, and he said to keep it.
Let's eat it.
That's almost certainly one of the ones from the side of the greenhouse. You could basically just lay it down on its side, you know, on the cactus garden over there.
Yeah.
And after that thing cures, we'll be able to replant it, but someone snapped it off, so it needs a few days to dry out.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
Sorry for the disturbance.
This is the 0.1% will be more resistant.
He like accidentally broke
well,
it.
they are at the very least the strongest. They're the ones that survived the first time.
Just leave.
Like students, what happens if everybody who fights you, out of everybody who fights you, the only one who survives is the one who beat you? And they have kids. What's going to happen the next time you fight them?
You're going to beat them because they're old.
Right?
They'll have like the good characteristics. You see, disease organisms, they breed quickly, so they're getting stronger. We're still the same. In my lifetime so far, I've had 37 years of being the same genetic loser, while diseases have had thousands of generations to get better and better and better and better. I get rid of all the weakest and I leave the strongest. Anybody know what we call that? The fact that diseases are getting stronger, they are... Yeah, selectively bred. We call them...
Selectively shooting yourself in the head.
So we call them superbugs.
That's an original.
Doesn't sound. That'd be a good TV show.
As of now, has there ever been like a superbug that is...
As of now, there have been a few superbugs.
Would you, like Ebola?
For example, there's a strain of mosquitoes that's now resistant to DEET.
To what?
There's a type of Staphylococcus infection that you can't stop with any modern medications.
So just eat your skin.
Well, anybody know what it's called?
What?
My homie Tim had it.
We can't stop it.
Something resistant Staphylococcus. It happens in hospitals and everybody freaks out that you'll get these superbugs in the hospital that you can't get rid of with standard cleaning. Well, my homie Tim was down in Costa Rica doing research on fish, and he had like an injury on his hand, and he spent all his time in the water in estuaries, and salt water has a lot of bacteria. And so anyway, he got a staph infection on his hand, came back to the United States, and he kept picking at it, wouldn't get better, and he went to the doctor, and he's like, I've got this infection. And they're like, whoa, that looks horrible. Have some like antibiotics. And then he comes back like 3 days later, and he's like, I don't think it's working. Look, it's spreading. He had like the dark veins going up his arm. And they're like, oh my God, we need to give you like the slam dunk, super gnarly antibiotics. And they kept him for observation, and the next day, like, it was still spreading, and they were like, we may have to
end
cut
it.
your arm off.
That's really bad.
We must
And
kill
like,
you.
no, they like put him in like the heavy containment, like creepy contagiousness part of the hospital, where like everybody had like the full protective gear, like I guess Ebola style. Eventually, they had to do surgery, and he's got like a hole on the back of his hand that you could put a golf ball in. Like, it's gnarly. They had like his fingers are kind of tweaked, and he's got like a big deep spot.
Yeah.
Was that the superbug?
That was a medicine-resistant MRSA.
Oh, yeah.
Medicine-resistant staphylococcus something.
We were just laughing about how the super gnarly slam dunk antibiotics, like that's the actual name of it.
Yeah, that's exactly the
That's
name.
what they
They are
are.
super gnarly.
Pull that out.
Slam dunk antibiotics.
Slam dunk.
And like that's what they put on the prescription bottle.
Ah. I'd like to finish. We're running low on time. Excuse me.
Okay.
Number 5.
Hashtag you're dead.
There are 2 scary population trends. Travel's getting cheaper and people are getting richer. Thus, more people travel. Did anybody notice that Ebola was just in Africa until all of a sudden it was in Spain and Dallas and Indonesia and New York and Detroit? Did you all notice that? Imagine if that Ebola strain had popped up instead of, where did it start? Ivory Coast?
Sierra Leone.
Liberia? Imagine that instead of starting in Liberia, it had started in downtown Los Angeles. Right? Like, let me show you what I'm worried about. How many of you have traveled to Asia? How many of you have traveled to Europe? How many of you have traveled to South America? How many of you have traveled to somewhere in the Pacific, Australia, islands? And has anybody here traveled to Africa? Well, there we go. This classroom, if you're all sharing germs, you've been to every major human habitation area of the planet.
Everybody has cooties.
No, really. Easier and more travel means more human vector effect. Like more of us spreading diseases around. Number 6, this is fun. We will travel much more soon due to climate change. Human migration will increase due to changing climate. So it's easier to travel and it's cheaper to travel and more of us travel. That's number 5. And number 6, we're all going to travel more because of changing climate. Number 7, think about this mathematical issue. You will have the same beautiful or crappy genes for your whole life. But bacteria, they breed every as much as 15 minutes. For the bacterial average, your lifetime is 250,000 generations. So who evolves faster?
Bacteria.
And what happens when you live longer?
More
Bacteria. You're weaker.
More bacteria. They have a chance to evolve more. You know, like there's like always in the movies the poor college kid trying to hack the password to save somebody's life on some computer somewhere. And they say, if I had more time, it would be easy, but the whole challenge is I only have fill in the blank amount of time. Like every television show ever. Every episode of 24. Well, when you live longer, the bacteria get more chances to evolve against you. Figure out the secret to hack the Cedar code. Yeah.
Is there a possibility for 2 viruses, say like AIDS and cancer, or not viruses, but just for them to like mix and create AIDS cancer? Like, I don't know, some sort of...
Kinda.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, retroviral basically scrambles genetics, and so it's a small risk, but You could argue essentially that in DNA almost anything is possible numerically. It's just a question of the odds. I'm almost out of time. I want to do 8 and 9. Let me finish, please. Never mind. I'm just going to keep you until I'm done. Number 8. Because more of us live in cities every year, we're getting more and more crowded, and as we get more crowded, we make each other sicker. Do you all know that Ebola has been around for like 30 years? 40 years? And for some of you, you've already heard this, it's been around in little tiny villages. So when Ebola would occasionally pop up, everybody would die before they could spread that disease to the next village. But now that we're all crowded like sardines in a can, Ebola spreads internationally before it's even diagnosed in the first place. Our crowding means disease has better chances. And finally, number 9. There is a really big difference between how your body would have worked in nature and how it works today. Keep in mind, you evolved in an environment where you lived outdoors, traveled in groups of roughly 17 humans, and check this number, in your whole lifetime, it was unlikely you would encounter 2,000 humans. So your immune system is built for that. Let me finish. Being surrounded by less than 17 humans per day, and seeing less than 2,000 in your life. A diet with less than 100 ingredients. Our bodies today are overwhelmed. You'll see more than 3,000 people today. You'll have single ingredients in your diet with more than 100 ingredients. Single foods in your diet with more than 100 ingredients. Think of all the chemicals you wear, that you paint on yourself. Bye-bye, children.